Hi everyone, this is Dr. Marco. Welcome to this week's health tip. So this week I'm going to be talking about an interesting topic. It's actually called a good bad stress. So what am I talking about? So certain things might be harmful for your body in a bigger dose, but on a smaller dose or at a certain range it actually might be helpful in a certain way. So there's actually a word for this phenomenon, and it's actually called hormesis. So hormesis is a sort of a thought process that a little bit of something that could be harmful can actually be helpful. And I'll explain, there's a lot of different examples of this, but I'll just give you one or two, and I might give some other ones another health tips. Okay, so let's say you have the cells inside our bodies. You have the cell, the nucleus, and inside the cells we have these little sort of guest bacteria that are inside our cells. They're kind of an ancient thing. They're actually called the mitochondria. And those are probably the single most important thing that keeps humans alive and healthy and functioning, because they're actually what produce energy for your cells to work. So you can worry about your hormones, your thyroid, your vitamin D and all that stuff, and how you eat and everything, but none of that's important if your mitochondria can't make energy. So for our overall health, these things have to be healthy. So mitochondria produce something called ATP, which is basically the unit of energy that our cells use to do stuff, basically. So that's how you get energy in your body. So if your mitochondria aren't working, you don't have enough ATP, you don't have enough energy, and you can't do stuff. Your body just won't work right. And so that's important for a lot of different things. So this concept of hormesis, I'll just give you an idea. You're eating a lot of refined sugars and sweets and grains and that kind of thing. One of the consequences of that is that your blood sugar goes up. And what your body does to combat the increase in the blood sugar is it pumps out a lot of a hormone called insulin. So insulin, I want you to think of that like a hormone of abundance, basically. It means there's lots of food, there's lots of things around, and there's a word for it. We actually call it a mitogenic hormone. Mitogenic means it causes mitosis, and mitosis is when a cell in your body will actually split itself and make two new cells. So you get mitosis, the cell splits, and you get two new cells, basically. So if there's a lot of insulin around, the cells are thinking there's lots of fuel, there's lots of food, and we can just keep dividing ourselves, which is great. But if that happens too often, you can get cells growing out of control, and that can push people towards like tumors and excess growth, so things that they don't want to be growing, like cysts and things like that. That's a big factor. But what happens is, if we think of this concept of hormesis, there's a thing that I've mentioned before where you can do something called intermittent fasting. So in that case, the best way to prevent insulin spiking in your blood, because spiking of insulin is basically known as the biggest thing that causes aging in our body. It causes advanced degradation of stuff. Things get all sticky. It's not a good thing. So basically you want to avoid insulin spikes. And the best way to avoid spiking of your insulin is to not eat food, because insulin is responding to energy coming into your body as food, basically. So if you eat sugar, it goes way up. If you eat protein, it kind of goes up, and if you eat good, healthy fats, it might not go up that much at all, but it might be a little bit. But the best way to avoid insulin completely is just to not eat food. So when you don't eat food, there's no signal going to your cells. And I don't want to say that you're starving yourself, but you're just pushing it for a period of time, because if you don't eat ever, then you'll die of starvation, right? So that's a bad stress over a long period of time. But if you do it as a compressed thing, like maybe 15, 16 hours over the course of a day, or maybe you just do a whole day where you don't eat, or maybe 2 or 3 days, then that's a sort of shortened period of a quote-unquote bad stress, but it's actually a good. Because what happens is, when your cells are working and they're doing their activity, just think about it like using something that has gears, or your car, or whatever that has moving parts. After a while, the moving parts kind of break down. You might have to replace them and that kind of stuff. So the same thing happens to your cells. The little organ, or they call them organelles, inside your cells, some of them might get ruined. You might have a mitochondria that kind of breaks open, or it's not working as good, and that kind of thing. So if there's no insulin, there's no signal for your cell to replicate itself. So it's going to do one of two things. If it's really weak, the cell will actually die, which is a good thing. That's actually called apoptosis. Okay, so there's something called programmed cell death. So your cells actually should have like a sort of a finite length that they should survive, and then they should die. So if the cell does die, it'll fall apart, the pieces of all those things will kind of be in your blood, and other cells can actually use them, recycle them. So you might be recycling damaged parts of your cells, or what might happen is the cell itself will actually let certain organelles in here break apart and recycle them and refortify the cell itself. So the cell will either die if it's gone too far, or it'll refortify itself and use the time that if it doesn't have to completely divide, and just use that energy to repair itself. So you either get a cell that dies, which needs to occasionally, or you'll end up with a healthier cell afterwards, due to this hormesis effect. Okay? So a short period of a quote-unquote bad stress can actually cause the cell to actually need to adapt. So it'll actually adapt itself. And sometimes it'll make more mitochondria because of this too, and so it'll be more adaptable to make more energy and things like that. So it'll do a lot of really interesting things that kind of keep itself healthier, because there's a period of time it's got to refortify itself to say, oh gee, maybe there's no food coming, so we better get ready and kind of be prepared and be more efficient, that kind of thing. So it'll actually become more efficient and repair itself and do what it needs to do, recycle parts and those kind of things, and maybe even make more mitochondria for more energy production. So that's just one example of a good bad stress, and I'll give you some other ones and some other health tips in the future, but I just want to get that point across. That's why one of the beneficial effects of that intermittent fasting that we keep talking about, like have dinner, don't eat any food until maybe the next day at lunch, or even go a little further to 2 or 3 o'clock and before you have any food, just water during that whole time. That helps your body push that little hormetic effect and cause some benefits to the cells inside your body. So that's your health tip for this week. If that was interesting or important, please share it, and we'll see you next time.